in preparation for the in-country training on national GHG inventories, focusing on waste and follow sectors. And I'm glad that Tanzania was able to send in the request that helped us to organize this meeting. Today's program is a bit short, and I will just take you through. We expect a few remarks from a representative from the Republic of Tanzania, and then also our remarks from the Global Support Program, CBIT, and I will be moderating the session. We had anticipated to have a quick quiz to help us get on board. But I don't know if we have more participants. We shall have the quiz. And then also we shall have a presentation about the GHG inventory process. And then another presentation will be on the introduction to new requirements for reporting national greenhouse gas inventories under the Paris Agreement, being guided by MPGs, but also the focusing on the associated flexibility provisions. And then we shall have a closing Mentimeter. And of course, in between the different presentations, we expect some questions and discussions from the participants. So at this juncture, I would like to welcome remarks from Tanzania. Over to you, Engineer.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity as Tanzania as part of this community. We are now having the process of preparation of BUR1, the first, and the SED and C, national communication. So we are very engaged and we are part of this process. And having this session, we recognize that is going to help us. And we have, since that, we have been getting much challenging in taking this process. We believe that after getting these 2 sessions of webinar and the coming in-person training, I think is a good idea to bring this chance to Tanzania because we are in the process of capacity building for the coming reportings. We expect that we'll not use, will not depend on consultancies, and we expect that if we build our capacity as Tanzania from the respective sectors, we could have been doing ourselves. And this it will help us to be faster than what we are doing today. So after the introduction of this coming training, my members who are participating in this process, they were so humble and able to join, and they will participate fully in this process as the way of capacity building for our sector. So in that case, let me take this opportunity on behalf of our office, the Vice President's office, which is the focal point for climate change and other related issues, to having these charts. So I believe that at the end of this discussion, we'll come up with a good idea and the way forward. Having said those few remarks, I thank you, and and we beg you to encourage this way of capacity building to our developing countries. Thank you very much.
Now, thank you so much for those encouraging remarks. The good thing we are recording this webinar, so our colleagues who have joined late will be able to listen in and follow the different elements of the trainings. We shall share it once it is technically ready. And also we shall share it on our platform. We have a climate transparency platform where we encourage all of you to join and be members, because there's an opportunity for you to access different training materials. So at this moment, I would like to invite Madam Kesiwe Kumalo from the Global Support Program to give her opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. And thank you, colleagues from Tanzania. It's good to be here with you this morning. And we are happy that we are collaborating and supporting Tanzania on a very critical element of the enhanced transparency framework. So I really want to extend our sincere gratitude to you all for joining us. And I hope that more participants will join as we continue this training. So just to say that we are excited to engage with you and support you as you develop your first biennial transparency report to the Paris Agreement. And I think I want to mention that this is a very critical time for global action, as we know that transparency is the backbone of the Paris Agreement. And we know that also with the enhanced transparency framework, this has also ushered in a new era of climate reporting, one that demands more frequent and comprehensive and rigorous reports from all parties of the Paris Agreement. We are aware that Tanzania is the least developed country, and with that comes very unique challenges, but also opportunities in this climate landscape. And countries like Tanzania, as an LDC, they may not be under the same time pressure to submit the first biennial transparency report by December 2024. However, it is very important to see such countries committed to the process and taking leadership and ensuring that you are on track in terms of understanding what is working in Tanzania based on the NDC that you submitted under the Paris Agreement, and see what critical challenges or gaps that exist in terms of how you can better inform your climate policy. And this webinar is designed to basically introduce you to the critical elements that will be important for you to understand before the hands-on training that will take place in a couple of weeks from now. And we anticipate and we hope that all the participants that will join the hands-in training will actually participate in the webinars, because this is very important, because we do not want to have a situation where during the hands-on training there is a lot of information gap, because we don't have enough time to cover many materials during the hands-on training. We want the hands-on training to be very practical, to be hands-on as the word implies. So it is very important for us that we attend the webinars to cover the basics, to understand the guidelines, and to understand the requirements, so that the hands-on training can focus on the technicalities of how you can prepare a GHG inventory for the waste sector and for the AFOLU sectors. And it's very important to ensure that this information is passed on to every participant who will join the hands-on. And also, I just want to ensure that you don't look at this training as just a training that will help you to put together your BTR, but think about long-term national capacities. And as engineers said, that with this frequent reporting, it is very critical that countries build a mass of domestic expertise around these issues, ensure that all the different sectors are engaged, ensure that all the different sectors have the capacity to support the coordinating institution to ensure that you are able to generate this report at the frequency as it is required, but also improve in terms of the technicalities of the reporting over time. And this is the most important basic principle of the ETF, that you have to improve over time. But I want to mention that improvement over time require also continuous capacity building and continuous engagement to ensure that with time you understand in terms of where you are and what are the critical needs, and your sector's experts are actually continuously getting training that is relevant to ensure that your reporting is improving over time. So without saying much, I just want you to request you that you approach this whole training, including this webinar, as a commitment, and also to ensure that you are bringing in more team members to ensure that you strengthen your national capacities. And we are happy to be joining hands with you in this journey. And we hope that you are going to continue to engage with us and apply the lessons that you are going to be learning here to ensure that your report is improved, but also you are ensuring that it is not taking you longer time to submit your BTR. So we are very excited. I have here also my colleagues that are working with me in the CBGSP. And I think, Sheila, if you allow, it will be good that we introduce ourselves, because we also want to know who is in the call and which sector they are working on, and so that we can best tailor-made the training for the participants that are actually engaging. So I think we need to introduce ourselves. So we will be happy to do that, Sheila. So I have already introduced myself. As you have said, I'm Ketsiwe Kumalo, working with CBGSP here at UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center. So I will allow my colleagues to introduce themselves. Freya.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Freya Milford, and I have recently joined the team at UNEP on the CBIT. So I'm really looking forward to getting started on the work being done, and yeah, going to use this as an opportunity. This is my first kind of webinar here today, so I'm going to use this as an opportunity to kind of get to know the work that's being done. So thank you.
Thank you, Freya. Francesco?
Hello,
We are not able to hear you, Francesco.
what about now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Speakers.
Please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
This.
We can hear you.
Microphone.
Yes, we can hear you. We can
Better?
hear you. Yes. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
I don't know what's wrong.
We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, maybe he's going to introduce himself at the end while he's sorting that out. I will hand over to you, Sheila. Maybe the colleagues also can introduce themselves. Yes, Sheila.
Yes, so I'm called Sheila Chichonjo. I'm the Anglophone Africa Network Coordinator under the CBIT Global Support Program, and I'm happy to see that more members have been able to join. I will hand over to the team of Tanzania to be able to introduce themselves. Thank you. maybe we can start with engineer. We cannot hear you. You are muted.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yes, I'm Engineer Juma Limbe from Tanzania. I'm coordinating this process in my country. You are welcome.
Thank you. Maybe we shall go to Sarafina. Kindly unmute and
Sarafina.
introduce yourself. Yeah.
Sarafina. Gambago. Don't hear you.
Okay,
You
I
are
am
muted.
Sarafina.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yes,
We can hear you.
Sarafina, go ahead.
Okay, I am Sarafina
Sarafina, go
Masanja.
ahead.
Yes, Sarafina Masanja. I'm working under the industrial sector.
Gambago, you are muted. You are muted. Unmute. Mike, go to the mic. No, we cannot hear you. Fikrini?
Yes, I think now
Yeah.
you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I am Neogratias Gambago, working with the Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries in Tanzania. Currently, I'm a chairperson of the Aforo Group and the GHG inventory. Thank you.
Fikrini?
Yeah, my name
Yes.
is. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Fikiri Muhenga. I'm working with Sokoine University of Agriculture. At the same time, I'm also working with National Carbon Sensor as a GIS and remote sensing expert. But in this GHG job, I'm working with AFOL. So my chairman is here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There is Dr. Shirima. Okay.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Deo, and I work at the National Carbon Monitoring Center. And I am responsible at the moment coordinating the greenhouse gas inventory. So working with the team to do the national greenhouse gas inventory. Thank you.
Sabroni Nziku. Hello, Ziku.
Yes, hello. Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Zabron Nziku, working from Tanzania Livestock Research Institute. But in relation to GHG, I'm agriculture expert. So we are under the full group. Nice meeting you all.
I don't see anymore. Maybe they will be coming.
I can see
So,
Abdallah
Sheila.
Lungo.
Abdallah Rungo. Yes, Abdallah Rungo.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Abdallah Lungo from Vice President's Office. I'm working, I'm a member of GHG inventory at the Aforo sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, so maybe at this moment, I'll also give an opportunity to my colleague Francisco to introduce himself.
Yes, sorry for before. Hope it speaks now. And yes, so Francesco Locatelli, I'm also joined the team of CBIT in Copenhagen a few months ago. I am an energy engineer, so that energy sector is mainly my expertise, but I'm also learning about other sectors like Afolu or others. So I look forward to work with you all in the future.
Okay, thank you so much. So, like we had mentioned on our program, our next on the program is introduction to the GHG process. We intend to give the basics, and then as we go along, we shall go deep into the subject for the Afolu and waste sector. But this is meant to just bring us to the same level of understanding. So I'll be delivering this presentation, and the presentation is about the greenhouse gas inventory process. I hope you can see my screen. So I will start by just defining a simple question: what is greenhouse gas inventory? I know most people in this webinar, you could be aware about the inventory, but just in simple terms, the inventory is about quantifications of the greenhouse gas emitted into and removed from the atmosphere over a given territory in amounts per unit of time. For example, it can be per day or per year. And then inventories generally specify the chemical identity of the GHG concerned, and then the geographic area covered, the time over which the emissions and removals are estimated, the sectors and activities that cause the emissions and removals. For this case, we have the Afolu and the waste sector that will be our focus in the enhanced training. And then, of course, what is the purpose of the greenhouse gas inventory? So the purpose is to quantify and understand the sources and sinks of the greenhouse gases, providing a comprehensive snapshot of a region's or a national contribution to climate change. And it is very important on why we need the inventories: to gain the scientific understanding, to understand the link between the environment, pollution, and its effect, but also to help provide the right information for formulating policies and policy implementation. But also the inventories help to develop cost-effective mitigation policies and actions, but also help to identify the sectors, sources, and activities responsible for emissions. But most importantly, quantifying GHG emissions and having an inventory helps us to monitor the process towards achieving the greenhouse gas goal. So the inventory is very essential, and it's a link between science and policy making. And I think it's very important that countries also use such kind of information to inform their planning processes. So reporting on national GHG inventory, of course, is well stated under the UNFCCC. Parties are required to report on information on the national anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions and removals, as well as steps taken to address the climate change, and on the results achieved. So specifically under Article 4 and Article 12 of the Convention and the recent COP decisions specify the national reports that must be submitted by parties, and the time, frequency, and also provide guidelines on how to prepare these reports. And like you had mentioned in your opening remarks, like Tanzania is in the process of preparing its 4th national communication, and then the 2nd BUR, and also now these reports have been combined. Later, you will also be submitting your BTR, and I know also in this process, you will be preparing your first BTR, and of course, the National GHG Inventory Report, which is part of the national inventory documents to be submitted under the BTR. So we have different obligations for developing countries and developed countries. For developing countries where Tanzania falls, we have to report on the national communication every 4 years. That is under Decision 17 of COP8. And then the the BUR, which are stopping in December 2024, they were being reported on every 2 years, but now we shall be having the BTR, which is going to start by December 2024, which will be also reported on every 2 years. So this process and the reporting obligations are very important, and that's why it is important for countries to have capacities so that they can manage the obligation under the different frequent time periods. So reporting on the national GHG inventory is specifically under the enhanced transparency framework was established through the Paris Agreement, and the ETF builds on the existing reporting processes. As you may be aware, the national communication and the BUR. And of course, the biannual transparency report was introduced for both developed and developing countries. And the first reports will be submitted in December 2024. But we understand that the least developed countries have a discretion, but of course, they are encouraged to start on the process. So measurement of all the emissions and removals of greenhouse gases from the given sources or sinks in a country over a specific period is provides description for the inventory in terms of the geographic boundary and the time period, but also the data on emissions from the different sectors and then the gases, and of course elaborating on the emissions by sources, and of course by the different subcategories for the different sectors. But also it is required that information on methodologies and data quality is also reported on in terms of what was used to calculate or measure the emissions per sector and for the given gases, and also assessment of the data quality for activity data and emission factors used for each of the sectors. So compilation of all the background information is very important, and of course it includes all these elements that I have mentioned. So so it is also important that the sectors should have clear elements on what they are reporting on. So countries have to elaborate on which sectors they are reporting on. For instance, the IPPU, that is industrial processes and product use, energy, waste, agriculture, land use and land change, and forestry sectors. So for today's for Tanzania, the first training, hands-on training, will focus on waste and Afolu. But to just mention, these two sectors are simply referred to as Afolu, that is agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, and estimated using the name in the IPCC guidelines, 2006 guidelines. So methodologies for estimating the inventories, they have been updated over time, and we have 5 volumes of the 2000 guidelines. And of course, they have included also the ETF requirements of the inventory, and parties are supposed to submit their BTR and must use the requirements as established under the MPGs, that is the modalities, procedures, and guidelines. So according to the UNFCCC reporting guidelines and the MPGs, the methods to estimate the GHG emissions removals shall be those that are provided under the 2006 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change guidelines for the national GHG inventories, but parties may use the 2000 IPCC refinement to the 2006 IPCC guidelines on a voluntary basis. So all these provisions have to be taken care of, but also in preparing the reports, countries are expected to elaborate on the specific guidelines that they used for the different gases. So the guidelines usually provides general guidance on reporting on specific sectors, energy, industrial processes, and product use, agriculture, forestry, and other land uses and waste. And it is expected that also countries provide how they have used the guidance on data collection, uncertainties, methodological choices, key categories, time series, consistency, and then quality assurance and quality control, verification, reporting, and of course, emission inventory. So parties are also expected to provide why it is, to understand why it is very important to use the guidelines in preparation of the inventories. So currently, most national emissions can only be estimated, but of course not measured. And so it is very important that we have consensus on the best way of doing this by coming up with clear standardization based on the guidelines that provides a standardized approach for calculating and reporting the GHG emissions and removals. But there should also be consistency to ensure across different inventories, but also help to create a benchmarking for improved reporting. But also credibility is very important by following the internationally recognized guidelines that help to ensure that the GHG inventories are transparent and credible and builds trust among the different stakeholders, especially when maybe there's need for requests for support in terms of investment to mitigate some of the actions. But also it is very important to have compulsion and benchmarking by providing or showing how you are using standardized methodologies and approaches to enable compulsion of the emissions across the different countries and sectors, facilitating benchmarking and, of course, best practices for emission reduction strategies. And, of course, this also in further helps in the global stock take exercise that picks data from different countries. So the IPCC guidelines cover a range of significant greenhouse gases that contribute to climate change. And of course, it covers the carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, halofluorocarbons, and of course, all the other gases. And then other halocarbons not covered by the Montreal Protocol, including the CF31 and all the other gases, as you can see. But most importantly, countries are expected to really show how they use the global warming potentials under each of the covered gases in their inventory. So that is very important. To just bring you to, I know some of you are already aware how these emissions are estimated. The estimates are made based on the parameters associated with the emission rates from carbon dioxide. Fuel depends on the carbon in the fuel, then carbon dioxide emission depends on the proportional to the amount of fuel burnt, and then also on the changes on carbon stocks, or for instance, in the forest of a given emissions or removals of the carbon dioxide equivalents. So in terms of the emission factors, so the emission per se, it is equal to the emission factor in terms of the multiplied by the activity data. So the total emissions for a country are calculated by summing up the individual emissions of the different sectors and removals across all sectors and categories and subcategories. And I know you are aware about this. So, of course, there are key principles for compilation of the GHG inventory. As you may be aware, they usually call it, in short, the TAC principles that represent the quality criteria that guides the work of the GHG inventory compilers. So just to remind ourselves about the T, which is transparency, which means that data sources, assumptions, and methodologies used for each estimate are clearly explained and documented. And then accuracy means that the estimates are not underestimated or overestimated. And then consistent means that estimates are calculated using the same methodology and consistent data sets for all the years of the inventory time series. And then completeness, it is means that an estimated category has full geographical and temporal coverage, and that the GHG flux is estimated for all the inventory categories. And then comparability means that estimates in different countries are comparable, having been prepared according to the IPCC guidelines. So countries are, of course, encouraged to use the IPCC software, which is a web-based software, but also countries sometimes tend to use their developed national-based web softwares or calculation data sheets. But it is very important, and now since we are moving to even tools that are produced for purposes of reporting, countries are encouraged to use the IPCC software, which also acts as their archiving system. But just to take you through the architecture of the IPCC, it contains default data. It has administrative functions, so each country puts what they can use to identify themselves in terms of the users and the years. And then it also provides quality assurance and quality control and uncertainty analysis, key category analysis, reference methods. And then data, it also provides for data export and import. It also provides worksheets for data entry, which are most of the time Excel-based. And then it provides with data managers for fuel, land representation, land use, livestock, and waste type. And then it also provides that a country has an opportunity to keep this data there as part of the archiving system. I will request that we mute ourselves. We mute ourselves while we are doing presentations. So in summary, the IPCC software was first released in 2012, and initially it was designed to be a simple tool implementing on Tier 1 methods according to 2006 guidelines. But of course, there have been latest versions, even of recent, there have been other versions. And I know you are aware about these versions, and all the methodological tiers and approaches according to the 2006 IPCC guidelines are included, for instance, in the version of 2.89, and then calculations of indirect carbon dioxide emissions and nitrous oxide emissions according to the IPCC 2006 guidelines, and in its 2019 refinement are also provided. And the latest versions have also provided interoperability functionality with the UNFCCC common reporting tables, tools for energy sector, waste sector, and agriculture sector. And I understand that some of your colleagues are also being taken through a hands-on training on some of these new reporting tools. So it will be very important that this hands-on training also can maybe take you through some of the tools for each of the sectors that you are going to focus on. So importance of data in the GHG inventories. Data is an integral part, of course, of the developing and updating the GHG inventory. And formalized data collection activities should be established, adopted to national circumstances, and reviewed periodically as part of implementing good practice. But also data collection procedures are necessary for finding and processing existing data, as well as for generating new data by surveys or measurement campaigns. And data collection should cover values and their uncertainties. And I'm aware that of recent, actually, you have been collecting some data, and I hope that maybe you can even use this same data during your hands-on exercises, so that it can relate to what you are trying to improve at national level. So possible sources of country-specific data, of course, the national and international and other sources, but national documents, sometimes countries are encouraged to use the national statistical reports, sectoral experts, stakeholder organizations where they can provide sector knowledge experts, and then other national experts, then reference libraries from the different published reports at national level, and also using the previous national inventory reports from parties that have been submitted to the UNFCCC would be very good sources for consistency. And then, of course, we have international sources where we have IPCC emission factors. I know you are aware about the database. And then international organization publishing statistics. For instance, the UN, we have sometimes FAO stat reports, than the Eurostat, international energy agencies, the IMF, which also contains the international activity as well as economic data. And then other national experts. Of course, you have to ensure that you document and reference the sources that you have used in your national GHG inventory. Then other sources could be scientific and technical articles in the environmental books, journals, and other reports. Of course, universities are encouraged to work closely with the inventory teams, and then web-based organization or specialist data that has been published and that is recognized. Then we have importance of data in GHG inventories. So as you may be aware, like I had mentioned, it plays a very crucial role in compilation of the inventories, but most importantly, it provides quality data, ensures that there is accuracy and reliability of the GHG inventories. Detailed GHG data helps to identify specific sources of emissions within sectors, and also enabling targeted emission mitigation strategies, but also to inform policy and other actions. Then data also enables tracking of emissions over time, both at national and international level. So this is brings it to the end of my presentation. I hope we have been able to get the basics of reporting in terms of the GHG processes. So I will allow if we have any questions for me. But if we don't have any questions, I will request my colleague Ketsiwe to make the next presentation.
I'm sure there are questions, Sheila.
I have not said, so I see something in the chat. So I see Deo Gracious is saying this is a good platform for all of us to understand history of GHG inventory, why we should undergo the GHG. Thank you so much, Deo Gracious, for that compliment.
Thank you too.
So maybe we can have the next presentation. If you have any questions, you can always type in the chat, or you can always put up your hand. I will give a chance to my colleague Ketsiwe to give the next presentation. And after her presentation, I had prepared a quiz. I will run the quiz. Maybe it will form the questions and maybe the understanding of what we have just presented. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sheila, for that. I will do my presentation, which is going to be focused on what is new. As you already know, that countries have been reporting to the convention. And I want to know from Tanzania, how many GHG inventory reports have you prepared?
This when we start the preparation of GHG inventory. This is a set.
This is the third process that you are going through. So have you been using consultants or national teams?
Before the first and the second, we used the consultants. But this one now, the third one, we're using the national team in doing this reporting.
Okay. So thank you for that. So the teams that you are using now, have they been involved in the other processes, or you have new team members?
They are not actually new members. They've been attending trainings for GHG inventories. And now then it's a time now we came to decide that let us now use this team with experience of being attending trainings so as we can achieve.
Okay. Okay, it's good to know this because now we are going to look at what is new based on the reporting that you have been doing. As you know, you have been reporting under the convention, and there have been specific reporting guidelines in the convention in terms of how the reports should look like, what methodologies you should be using. So now under the Paris Agreement, there is actually a new reporting guidelines, which we call the modalities and procedures for developing or for reporting on the biennial transparency report. And these guidelines are separated in terms of the overall guiding principles, how the report should look like, and also what needs to be reported when you are reporting your national inventory, and also what needs to be reported.
If you had meant to project, because we cannot see your presentation.
What is meant to what you are meant to report when you are reporting on the tracking progress, and also of impacts for adaptation, climate impacts and adaptation measures. So these guidelines give us an overall guidance in terms of what information, what elements needs to be done. So my presentation will focus on what needs to be presented or to be taken into consideration when you are preparing your GHG inventory. So Sheila has highlighted in terms of why we are doing the GHG inventory. I will just draw your attention based on what she has said, that when we are doing the GHG inventory, we collect data to understand emission profiles in the country. And this is useful because we want to know which sectors are emitting the highest emissions, and then identify mitigation measures for each sector. Under the ETF, we use the GHG inventory. It's a very critical component. As you know that the goal of the Paris Agreement is linked to minimizing an increase in global temperatures, which are linked to GHG emissions. So the GHG inventory becomes very crucial because it carries this information for parties to understand if they are making progress in terms of implementing the national NDCs, and also if the mitigation measures that have been put in place are working or not. So the GHG inventory is used to actually understand the current status. And as you know, that when you are identifying mitigation measures, you do projections of GHG emissions. And these projected GHG emissions also help us to understand what is the mitigation trajectory that the country is going to be taking, and if what the mitigation measures that are being implemented are working. And that makes the GHG inventory very crucial or very important part of the ETF. And this is not information that is useful at an international level, but this is information that is also equally useful at a national level, because the country needs to understand if the policies for climate change policies are working or not working. So under the ETF, the reporting is done through the biennial transparency report, which is called the BTR, and this is enshrined in the decision 5 CMA 3. Under the Annex 4, you will find the detail in terms of how the BTR should look like. And I will encourage the team to take time, look at this decision, because it carries the most fundamental elements that are required for reporting. So the BTR is structured into 3 key thematic areas, or 4 thematic areas, which is the National GHG inventory and progress made in implementing and achieving the NDC, climate change impacts and adaptation, and financial technology transfer and capacity building. And the other additional elements are very useful when the country is submitting the BTR at the same time when the national communication is due. So you can submit one report, but include in your BTR the other elements that are required for reporting under the national communication. And most importantly, to know that the ETF comes with a lot of flexibility for developing countries. And it is very important that you take note of this flexibility and ensure that you are able to use them to facilitate improvement over time of your reports. And I'm not going to go into details on the different elements. I just invite the team to look at this, and it's very, very important. So now I'm going to zoom into the National GHG inventory reporting. But I want us to look at what has changed in the reporting. As we know, as we have already said, that we have been reporting under the convention. So you can see on the left side, I have put in what we have been reporting on. So we can see for developing countries like Tanzania and many other developing countries known as Annex 1 parties have been reporting national communications, and the GHG inventory has been a key component of the national communications. And in Lima, countries decided also that it will be important to update these national communications and submit what we call biennial update reports, which are known as BURs. And also BURs, as we know, the key chapters of the BUR were the National GHG inventory and the mitigation chapter. And this has been the fundamental key areas where developing countries have been reporting their national GHG inventories. If you look at the box in green on the right, this is now the ETF framework under the Paris Agreement, where now all parties, I want you to take into consideration that and understand that under the convention, there have been reporting requirements that were segregated in terms of whether the country is a developed country or a developing country. And as you can see, developed country had very rigorous reporting, and developing countries didn't have that vigorous reporting. So now under the ETF, all parties, that means that we are reporting the same vigorous information that is required, and also the frequency of the reporting is now the same. And the guiding principles and modalities and procedures are the same for all parties under the Paris Agreement. While under the convention, this was separated. There were reporting guidelines for developed countries and reporting guidelines for developing countries. Now we are all reporting under the same framework, using the same guidelines, and the same level of information is now required for all parties. So I have already mentioned that we are using the BTR as the key vehicle to report, and very mandatory key elements of the BTR is the National GHG inventory, and also the progress of NDC in terms of implementation and achieving these NDCs. And key principle is the improvement over time, I have already mentioned, and also all countries, all parties under the Paris Agreement are now going to go a technical expert review and also do the facilitative multilateral consideration in the same manner, which was different before. So what is encouraging is that the ETF take into consideration that countries are starting at different levels. As you can see, that developed countries are quite advanced in their reporting, and developing countries are not very much advanced. So the ETF has embedded flexibility mechanism that help developing countries to ensure that over time they are able to build their capacities and be able to fully report on the different elements. So for a start, it's important to use this flexibility mechanism to see how countries like Tanzania can ensure that even though you don't have the same capacities as developed countries and also other developing countries, how can you leverage this flexibility mechanism to ensure that you are building your capacities over time, and you are able to, at some point, be able to meet all the reporting requirements. We are going to see which areas are with flexibility for the GHG inventories. I am not now able to move my screen for some reason.
Maybe you could first remove it from presentation mode.
Let me share it again. Sorry about that. It seems stuck. But in my next slide, I wanted to show some of the elements in real time that are now different for the reports of GHG inventory. So on the left, you see what are the key elements for reporting GHG inventory under the BUR or the National Communication.
Sorry, we can't see it. Sorry, we can't see you don't see the slide yet.
Ah, okay. Sorry about that. And on the right side, you see the reporting elements for the BTR. And you can see from these elements which areas you have flexibility on. For instance, the key change, the main change that you see is the use of the methodology. Previously, many countries have been using the 1996 IPCC guidelines. As Sheila mentioned, that these guidelines have been evolving over time. And under the BTR, we are now mandated to use the 2006 IPCC guidelines. And these IPCC guidelines have new categories that were not there in 1996 guidelines, and they are data intensive compared to the 1996 guidelines. However, there are also opportunities using these guidelines because they have got a lot of simplified approaches and also a more default values that we can use. And also the years that we are reporting under the BUR, we were supposed to report T-4, so which means that you can report 4 years back as your reference year. And now under the BTR, this is T-2 with flexibility to T-3. And we are going to get into details of how this is embedded in the MPGs. And also now, recalculation, of course, is going to be a very important element because, as we know, based on the principles of the GHG inventory, if you change methodology, you have to recalculate the whole time series. And also, the new reporting element under the GHG inventory under the ETF is that now countries are expected to submit a narrative report of their GHG inventory plus CRT tables, which is called the Common Reporting Tables, which is a summary in terms of the quantitative information of your GHG inventory. And now it is also mandatory to do key category analysis in your inventory, and very important, but we have flexibility in doing so based on the flexibility mechanism of the ETF. And very important now, it's also very mandatory for countries to report on institutional arrangements and also to elaborate on a quality assurance and quality control plan, although here there is flexibility for developing countries. And we have also flexibility, but we have to use AR5 global warming potential, which is based on the IPCC assessment, 5th assessment report. And also very importantly to note that now it is mandatory for countries to actually do uncertainty and assessment. So this is really a basic summary of what has changed between the BUR reporting. Even though in the last reporting phase, these elements were there, as you can see, there is now a difference in terms of the use of should and shall. As we know that under the UNFCCC guidance, if we have a shall, if it says shall, it means it is mandatory. But if it is a should, it means countries are encouraged to do so, but they are not mandated to do so. So many of the reporting requirements under the BUR and the national communication for developing countries, it has been an encouragement or it has been a use of should. Very few elements were actually mandatory. But now all the elements are mandatory, but we can use flexibility for developing countries. So these are the key reporting elements for GHG inventory based on the guidelines. So the first element, I think this has not changed. These are the guiding principle in terms of how we develop GHG inventory. And I think Sheila mentioned this, very important to be transparent, very important to ensure that our inventory is accurate. We are not underestimating, we are not overestimating. And also we are consistent in terms of the use of information, activity data, and emission factors, and also that we are ensuring that our inventory is comparable across the different GHG inventories that are developed by other countries. National circumstances and institutional arrangement, this is mandatory to have this, but we are no longer talking about just what is happening in our countries, but what is important based on the guidelines is that we link this to how this is influencing our GHG emission profile and also how this is influencing our ability to mitigate GHG emissions. And in terms of the methodologies, the MPGs elaborate in terms of what methodologies to use, the parameters, the data that we can use, and also key categories. There is an elaboration in terms of how countries can go about doing key category analysis, of course, linked to the IPCC guidelines, time series consistency and recalculation. I have already mentioned this, uncertainty analysis, assessment of completeness, and quality assurance and quality control. And also there is guidance in terms of the metrics. This is the metrics that we are talking about are the global warming potential, which the MPGs guide us to use the 5th assessment report, global warming potential. And there is a lot of guidance also in terms of how we can generate the information on methods and cross-cutting elements. As you know that there is quite a lot of information that relates to cross-cutting elements when it comes to GHG inventory. And also the guidelines guide us on the specific sectors and gases that are important. And I'm going to elaborate this on the next slide. So when we look at these elements, here I just put this slide because it gives us a very clear picture in terms of the color coding of what is mandatory and what is a may or should requirement. As I mentioned, where there is a shall, it means it is mandatory. So when you are preparing your inventory, please do take note of these elements. So if it says you shall report on arrangement for inventory planning, preparation, and management, it means in your report, this information should be there. And if it is a should or a may, it means you can apply some flexibility on some of these elements. So in terms of national circumstances, you need to take note that it is important to actually have these arrangements stipulated in your report. And in terms of methods, as I've already mentioned, key category analysis, and where you see FX, it means you have flexibility. So we can see in the area of methodology, we have 4 flexibilities, and I'm going to go into detail in terms of how what are these flexibilities. And then you see also in the matrix, there is no flexibility in using the AR5 global warming potential. And the reporting guidance, we know that now, before we used to submit a report, as I mentioned, that now it is important to submit also the CRT tables, which carry the quantitative information of your inventory. And you have also flexibility in the time series. So methods, I have already mentioned, we have all parties shall use 2006 IPCC guidelines. And we should use the same methods and be consistent in terms of activity data, emission factors over the whole time series. And as guided by the IPCC guidelines for data gap, we can use the splicing techniques to fill some data gaps if they are. Time series consistency, the guidelines allow us that we shall perform recalculation across the time series. And as I mentioned, we have to do this if there is a change in activity data, if there is a change in emission factor, if there is a change in the use also of methodology. It's very important to actually take note of that, because this actually changes the whole emissions. And for instance, many countries have been using AR5, AR2 for GWP, and now the guidance is saying use AR5. So these values are completely different. So it's very important to apply a consistency across in terms of the methodologies. And then in terms of completeness, there is a guidance in terms of how countries to ensure that we include all the categories as per the IPCC guidelines. And where we don't have information, we have flexibility to use the notation keys like NE, which is for not estimated, and we have to explain why we have not estimated this emission in this particular category. And also very important when we are doing a key category analysis, that we are now able to apply a 95% threshold for level and trends. And before it was 85%. And people who do statistics tell you the difference between these numbers. It actually means there's a quite difference. And there is also a shall apport to do uncertainty analysis. However, there is flexibility for developing countries, because if you don't have capacity to do uncertainty analysis, you can mention in your report that you didn't do uncertainty analysis because of unavailability of data or lack of technical capacities. Again, quality assurance and quality control, this is a key element of a GHG inventory, and it's very important to actually do quality control of your data, quality control of your estimations, and also have a quality assurance, have someone, a review, someone who has not done the inventory, who has not been involved in the different processes of the inventory, to actually do the quality assurance for you. This is what we call the quality assurance. And you have to elaborate a QA and QC plan, and it's very important. And the IPCC guidelines give you the basic minimum of quality control checklist in terms of what you need to check when you are doing quality control and also quality assurance. However, you are allowed to expand this basic checklist to actually conform to your needs as a country. And this is the key flexibility that I want you to take note of in the different elements. So this table, you will need to understand and have this handy when you are developing your GHG inventory, to understand which areas you are supposed to actually use key categories on. I have already mentioned uncertainty. So here, these are the key full expansion in terms of how this flexibility are elaborated in the MPGs. So I will not really waste time to go through them. And here also the guidance gives us an outline of the national inventory documents in terms of how it should look like. So you have the executive summary, and also this is part of as decision CMA 3. Please do have a look at that. The first chapter is the national circumstances, the trends in GHG emissions, and then the sectoral emissions by sector. And in each sector, very important to elaborate your activity data, emission factor, your key category analysis, and uncertainty analysis for each sector. And based on the guidelines, countries also can include other sectors that are not included in the IPCC sector. If you feel like this is a key category and this sector is not in the IPCC guidelines, you are allowed to include this based on the guidelines. And very important, and also very something that is also new now in the reporting, is very important to report on indirect CO2 and N2O emissions. And recalculations I have already mentioned, and improvements. So improvements here are linked to your use of flexibility. So where you are using flexibility, it's important to elaborate what you will improve next time and when you are going to actually do these particular improvements. And also these are the annexes of the NID, which is the National Inventory Document. Very important key category analysis, your uncertainty analysis, and the detailed description of the reference approach. Those energy experts understand what reference approach is, because when you do estimation for the energy sector, there are two methodological approaches that you can use, which one is a top-down and the other one is a bottom-up approach. So it is important to do both and compare your results. And this is compulsory now to have it also as an annex in your national inventory document. And then the QA/QC plan, I have already mentioned, this should be an annex of your document, and any additional information that you think is very important to enhance transparency and completeness of your inventory. And of course, the CRT tables, very, very important. So the tables themselves, I think we can have a different conversation around how the tables look like. Here, I've just summarized how these tables look like. So for each sector, you will see that it is important to have 3 levels of tables: the background sectoral tables, and the sectoral tables themselves, and then the summary of the tables. And we have also cross-cutting tables like the flexibility table, and uncertainty and key category analysis tables. So these are very important cross-cutting tables. And the tables are in 3 levels, as you can see. In this graph, we have the sectoral background tables. This is where you include your activity data, emission factor, and the sectoral table summarizes your emissions by sector, and the summary tables gives you a summary of the national inventory in different elements. And this is also summarizes the emissions using the global warming potential, so translate everything into CO2 equivalent. So we can have a different, and I hope that you will have a presentation when you do the hands-on in terms of how these tables look like, and how, if you use the IPCC software, you can generate these tables. So the slides, I'm not going to go through this. I just provided these slides for you for your guidance in terms of the details of how your national inventory report is going to look like. And I want to mention also that with the new reporting requirements, as I said, you can submit a national inventory report as a standalone report, or you can submit this as part of your BTR report. So here you will find all the difference and the references to the specific guidance of the MPGs. Please do take a look and read again the MPGs. So I will end my presentation by really encouraging you to actually look at the new elements, but also don't feel overwhelmed by these new elements. Do take time to understand what flexibilities you can use. And also if there is any area where you don't understand how to use these flexibilities, please let us know. We are here to guide you across the process, and the experts that are going to come to Tanzania will actually give you more information on how you can navigate these guidelines and how you can use some of the flexibilities. So with this, I will end my presentation here and hope that you have a lot of questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ketsiwe. I will now wait for the questions. My teammates from Tanzania, please ask questions. Ketsiwe loves questions. Yes, kindly unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, thank you, Ketsiwa. I think it's a very, very informative presentation. Thank you very much for that. It's really super good. I had a quick one. You mentioned about the flexibility in the difference in the BUR and BTR in terms of time, T-4 and T-2. And can you give a little bit more explanation on this? How should the countries, when you're doing this, work it out, whether we're doing it? I mean, and to give more information on our case is that we had our second communication, and most of the work were done based on tier 1 kind of approach. So we had an inventory which followed, but we didn't report it. So we are now thinking of picking from the higher one, which we had in the second communication when we are doing this, and that would be about 20 years now. So how do we work it out that? Because there are a lot of things we need to recalculate from what we had the previous. Actually, we had the previous one up to 1994. Now we have to pick from 1994 up to 2021. And there's a whole thing to do. And if we have to go back to the one that we reported from 1994 back to 1980s, that will be completely difficult to do that, because we can't get into that. But at least we can pick from 1994 to this to this end. So that's a little bit of dilemma. If I can get your comment and reaction on that. But the other one, actually, you have already showed it, which I had. It's on the guesses, the 7 guesses. But now I think it's clear now, because I've seen this. We are supposed to report on 7, but at least there's a flexibility that we can do the first 3 and then the other one as they occur in the country. At the moment, we don't have much data on the. We only much have on the carbon, the methane, and nitrous oxide. But on the rest, it's really difficult to get data at the moment. And some of them, they may not apply. But anyway, I will wish to hear your reaction on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I think I'll start with the last one. You are right. Now you can use flexibility. Please do use this flexibility. Forget about the other guesses for now. This is your first BTR. So just report on the NTO, CH4, and CO2. And take it from there. When you continue to report over time and start to understand also the activity data that is required for the other guesses, then you can include this as you move along. And I know that some of the guesses, especially the HFC's guesses, may not apply in Tanzania. So it's fine. I think do use the flexibility and report on the 3 mandatory guesses. With regards to the question related to T's, I want to break it down because you brought in 2 different elements. So the T in this case, in the presentation, it's I should have used X actually, is the time. the time frame here, not specifically referring to the tier in terms of the methodologies. So in this case, if we are saying T-4 for the BUR, it means that if a country was submitting a BUR in 2004, it means that the latest inventory, which is the reference year of the inventory that it should submit, it should be from 2020, right?
Mhm.
So it has to have the inventory up until 2020. But under the BTR, it says that you have to submit T-2, which means that if you are submitting your first BTR in December of 2024, the latest inventory year should be 2022. You have flexibility to go to T-2 or T-3, so which means that you have flexibility to report to up to 2021. So this is how this T minus works out to be. So this is the time step in terms of until when. And also please take note that the guidance also says your time series should be from 1990. So you have to start reporting data from 1990. You don't have to go to the 80s, but you start from 1990. So I understand that your inventory from the first communication is until 1994. So, and this is something that is also different. I want to speak to that. That in many countries, when they were doing inventories for national communications and also BURs, they were not doing a time series because it was not compulsory. Some countries were just reporting 1 year and without talking about what's happening in the previous years. And some countries were doing time steps. Some they were doing 5-year time steps. So which means they were reporting 1990, 1995, and 2000. And the years in between, they were not reported. But now, under the BTR, it is mandatory that you have a time series that is starting from 1990. So you will have 1990, 1991, 1992 up to 2022. Your inventory should have a full complete time series. However, if you have years where you don't have the data, you can use the splicing techniques to fill the gaps. And if this is more than 4 years, you are allowed then to use flexibility to mention that you don't have data for some of the years because also statistically you can't use data gap. Are you talking to me, Dr. Shirima?
No, sorry, there was an inconvenience noise.
Okay.
I'm muting my mic now, sorry, thanks.
Thank you for that. So now if your years are more than 4 years with data gaps, you can mention that because statistically, most of the techniques, you can't use them to fill data gaps that are more than 4 years because then we start to have a lot of noise in your data. So, and also there's actually, when you start to think of it, GHG inventories are actually related to actual economic activities in your country. So it is not advisable that you do that because what's happening in your country when you see an increase or decrease on GHG emission, there's a lot of policies being implemented or a lot of activities happening in your country that influence that trend. So if you have gaps that are more than 6 years, it's very difficult to explain sometimes some of the spikes, if it's spiking or if it's going down. So it is very important to take note of that. So you can say you don't have data. I also want to mention that there is flexibility now under the MPGs to actually not go to 1990 for many developing countries. You start the starting year according to the flexibility is that you can start from the reference year of your NDC. For instance, if you don't have data going to 1990 or 2000, but your reference year of your NDC is 2010, it means your time series can start in 2010 and go forward. So it is compulsory that you include the reference year of your NDC in your time series. So that is something that you also have to take note of. And then you can mention that you have used this flexibility while you are still trying to figure out how you get data going backwards. So I hope that it's clear. But with regards to the tier, I think you can still continue to use tier 1. Of the methodologies, I think these are perfect most for LDCs and seeds and many other developing countries. You can still use tier 1, and then with time, as you build in your capacities, as data become available, you can move into tier 2 or tier 3. But I want to really believe that this will take you some time, but please do just use tier 1. It's good enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. Thanks.
Yeah, we are expecting another question. Any other question? Yes, engineer, kindly go ahead.
Yeah, Madam COS, thank you very much for your useful and comprehensive presentation. My question or my concern is on the reporting of the GHG inventory. If I was clear, I heard you highlighted that we may submit the standalone GHG inventory. But what I know, the BUR, which we are dealing with it now, has contained other chapters such as MRV, national circumstances, cross-cutting issues, and the other. So can you clarify on that? That we can report the standalone just inventory and the other reports, or I'm not clear on that.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the question, engineer. Let me clarify. What we mean by you can submit the national inventory report as a standalone document basically means that you can take this national inventory report as one report. So which means that you will submit 2 reports. You will submit the report which has all information on national inventory report, and submit another report which has the other information that you just mentioned, be it in a BUR and also in the BTR. It's the same approach. But you can also choose to have the national inventory as a chapter in one document, which is the BTR or the BUR. So chapter 1, you will have national circumstances. Chapter 2, you have national inventory, right? So then you have chapter 3, your mitigation assessment. Chapter 4, your MRV, if it's a BUR, and then all other information. But you have the liberty to actually submit 2 reports. So one report should have national inventory. And this is very important for big countries specifically, because some of the inventory reports from very big countries have a lot of extended information. So if you make it one report, it easily goes to 1,000 something page. But if it's like one report at a time, you can have an inventory report, which is an inventory report, detailed inventory report is between 300 to 500 or 600 pages sometimes. So this is just a matter of packaging the report. It is really, the aesthetic is not really very much, I think. It's just to say you can have one report and then include all other information in another report. That's basically what it means. But it doesn't mean that if you have a standalone national inventory report, then you don't include, you don't have information on the other elements. No, you have the other elements, but in a separate report. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I can see another question from Doctor. Why do we have to submit both the BUR and the BTR? Can countries go for BTR?
Yes, I think there's been a lot of discussion, as you know, that the BURs are going to be phased out, and after December 2024, they will not be relevant anymore, based on the decisions of the Paris Agreement, that the BTR are going to supersede these reports. So the challenge now is that we have countries that have resources from the GEF to elaborate their national communication and their biennial update reports. And these resources they received in 2020, in 2021, depending on when your project was approved. And now we are at the time where you have to submit also the BTR. So the reasoning behind submitting the BUR and the BTR is basically a logistic challenge, that if you already had the resources from the GEF to elaborate your BUR, you have to submit this BUR because you were given the resources. It has nothing to do with the guidelines of the UNFCCC or the guidelines under the Paris Agreement. So this is just a logistic issue. And countries that already had resources to do their BUR, they can request like what you call a top-up support from the GEF, which is—
I think Tanzania received the top-up. That's why actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you have received this top-up, it means that you have to submit these two documents, BUR and BTR. But my advice is, and this is what we have been discussing with the GEF, is that you just do one document, follow the modalities and procedures and guidelines of developing a BTR. Don't follow the BUR guidelines. Follow the BTR guidelines and develop one report and give it the two names. And depending if you are including adaptation, you know adaptation is not relevant for BUR, you can skip that chapter for your BUR and have the GHG inventory and the mitigation assessment, which is your NDC tracking under the BTR, and support needed if you want. This is also not compulsory under the BUR. So you can really have summarized information under the BUR, or you can submit both documents and say, this is my BUR, this is my BTR. Because now the BURs that are going to be submitted in December, they are not going to be reviewed anymore because there are no resources to review both BUR and BTRs under the UNFCCC. So your BUR has already been overtaken by time. The reason why you have to submit it is because you were already given the money to do so. That is the only reason. Otherwise, you are not really compelled to submit the BUR. But because you already had the resources, so develop one report. One, you call it a BUR, and another copy and paste BTR. But when you're developing this report, follow the guidelines of developing a BTR so that you can meet the required reporting guidance of the ETF.
Yeah, thank you so much for that elaboration. I can see a hand from Excellent. I think Excellent, you will unmute yourself and first introduce yourself, and then you can also give your submission. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, hello, we can hear you.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Excellent Hatchlake from UNDP, National Office for Africa. I do collaborate with the colleagues that are conducting this discussion. I just wanted to emphasize one point, following up on what Ketsiwe had said about the advantages of submitting the BTR, because that will give you very good advantage in the sense that you will already meet the requirement for submitting the BTR. So you may have the flexibility, but it's a great advantage if you take that route to ensure that you actually submit the BTR. Of course, you have that choice of submitting both, which is important, but just to emphasize that having the BTR submitted is great advantage in terms of going forward and the ambition and commitment of the country to meeting the Paris Agreement. I thought I would just emphasize that point. Thank you. Over.
Yeah, thank you so much. Excellent for that emphasis. And I think this provides the Republic of Tanzania a place to make a better decision and also define the scope in the remaining time, what they can be able to do. And I think the reporting, the training then becomes very timely. So I hope maybe our next webinar will be taken more serious and more participants will come to learn some of these things. I see engineer has a hand up. Kindly unmute yourself and speak.
Okay. Regarding the BTR, Tanzania, we signed the PCA with UNEP for undertaking BTR. We term as a top up to BUR, but we have not yet received the funding from the funders. So that's why we are still going on with the BUR. But you say that the BTR is very important to be submitted, to be in a good position. So maybe if there are representatives from those funders, if they can hear this, it's better now to leave this top up for BTR so as we can fasten the process together with the BUR. Thank you very much.
We are collaborating with them. I think maybe Ketsiwe can give a better guidance. And actually, from the whole arrangement, remember from the meetings we have had with Marcelos, I thought they had released the funds because he kept mentioning the BTR. So I thought that the process was provided where they gave you a top up. So maybe we shall follow up to find out how far the process is or how it might be possible to get the top up. So you do the combined BTR and BUR. So yeah. But I see Abdarungo's hand up. Kindly unmute yourself and speak. Mr. Abdarungo, can you hear us? I see your hand up. Yeah, maybe if he's not hearing us, we can go on with the next session on the program. On the program, we're supposed to have a quiz. We shall have it in the next webinar. So because now we have not done well on time, I will request that we run our last part of the meeting, which is the survey, to pick your view on how we have your feedback on how this webinar has been conducted. So I will project it on your screen. Abdalungo, are you still interested in making your submission?
Yes.
Kindly do before I share the, yeah.
Yes, I want to ask you that what are the key elements which show that the VRT report follow the principle of ETF?
I didn't understand that, Sheila. Did you understand that?
No, I was trying to understand the question. Maybe kindly ask again. Mr. Abdallah, we cannot hear you. You are muted.
I think he was asking for what would be the evidence to show that the BUR has followed the guidelines for the ETF, basically the guidelines for doing the BTR. Because we said when they are doing their BUR, they should follow the new MPGs. I think that's what I heard from him. But I think basically the answer would be that they have to use the guidelines as provided in the MPGs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope he's gotten the answer.
Yes, so Mr. Abdallah Lungo, as long as you follow the guidelines of the MPGs, then they will know that you have been able to submit a complete BUR. Maybe because Ketsiwa, you mentioned that they will not be reviewed. I think that's where the question is coming from. Yeah.
He wants to be reviewed. He will be reviewed. The BTR will be reviewed.
Okay, so I will request that we switch on our video so that we can take a photo for this session before we can close. Kindly put your video on. Dr. We cannot see, Dr. Shirima, we cannot see your photo.
I have an issue. I don't know. Let me try if I can get it. I don't know what's happening because I can't. It's my.
So, Mr. Abdallah Lungo, we are not seeing your photo now. We can't see the photo of engineer. Sarafina, kindly switch on your camera.
So my camera is on, but unfortunately, I don't see. I don't know what's happening.
Okay, so
Check
we are
your
missing.
computer. Check your computer camera. Maybe it's closed. Move it.
I think it's something to do with the browser I'm using.
Okay. So I'm taking the first photo, but we are missing engineer. I don't know what has happened. And yet he has been on camera. Yeah, I have taken a photo without engineer and without doctor. But I have all the others. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm going to share the Menti for the feedback survey. If you can see my screen, I will request that you go to your browsers and put www.menti.com, and then you will enter this code. It is 8203 4964. I can put this code for easy access in the chat. Yeah, so you go to your browsers and put www.menti.com, and then you can use that code. I've not seen anyone. Yeah, I have seen one person. How satisfied are you with the training? Only one person has been able to log in. Kindly go to www.menti.com and you can use the code 82034968. And as we plan for the next training, which is on the same day, same time, on 19th, kindly inform your colleagues to take part in the webinar, because it's very important to have this knowledge before the hands-on training. It is a very good preparation. So we have only 3 people who have managed to log in. It would be nice at least all the 5 who attended. Were we 5? Yeah, we had about 5. Yeah, from Tanzania. So we have only 3. It would be nice at least we have all of you participate in the Menti. Now we have only 3. So how relevant was this training for your work? I can see 2 people are saying very relevant and 1 person said extremely relevant. How can we improve this training in the future? Time for the meeting to be in the afternoon to evening. So I will change the timing for the other session to the evening. I hope members will be available, especially the people to make presentations. So I will try to change the time. Thank you. Do you have any other comments you would like to share? Someone is saying it was very good. It was good. Thank you so much for joining today. We shall share maybe the link for those who have been able to attend. Maybe they will be able to give us their feedback. I will share the link with the team members. I will request that for only those who have been able to attend the training. But once the recording is technically available, I will still share the recording so that you can go through, especially for the questions and any other elements that you would want to understand better. So if we don't have any other remarks, I will ask you to say bye, to unmute yourselves and say bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Sheila.
Bye.
Okay, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Bye.